The Treaty of Versailles was very harsh on Germany and led to events we know today. The reasons for the start of World War II were directly linked to the Treaty of Versailles, as it proved insufficiently harsh to prevent Germany's resurgence. But at the same time, he was not too soft to calm Germany and allow the Weimar Republic to develop successfully. But what if Danton decided to treat Germany a little softer after World War I? Could Austrian artists come to power again? Or could the Weimar Republic survive? Let me show you what I've come to. In fact, softening the punishment for Germany is more complicated than one might think. To minimize the butterfly effect, we cannot make significant changes to the events of World War I. For example, if Germany had lost in 1914 or 1915, its punishment would have been much less, but we would have entered a completely different reality. Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and the Russian Empire would likely still exist. This would be a completely different universe. So, here is what I propose. World War I unfolds similarly, but Americans take a more active role and persuade their allies of their ideals. This allows France to significantly reduce its expansionist ambitions, which in turn leads to a more conciliatory peace treaty with Germany. In general, we need France not to demand too harsh conditions, as the French literally wanted to divide and dismember Germany, which contradicts our concept. Now that we have discussed this, what exactly are we changing? We need a peace treaty that is soft enough to prevent the rise of the Austrian artist. I want to consider 4 main points to make this treaty more lenient for Germany: the Danish corridor, Saar, the Rhine region, and Germany's military operations. The first thing is the Danish corridor. This territory was transferred to Poland to provide it with access to the sea, separating East Prussia from mainland Germany. This became an important point for propaganda among German ultra-nationalists. Therefore, Germany needs to retain this territory. Nevertheless, Danton still wants Poland to have access to the sea. Here, we need to show creativity. I propose to allow Poland to establish a protectorate over Lithuania. Historically, the Poles indeed aspired to this, and if we go this route, Poland will gain access to the sea. In fact, Poland tried to subjugate Lithuania immediately after both countries gained independence, but these attempts failed mainly due to Vilnius. In general, Poland captured Vilnius, which the Lithuanians wanted to make their capital, and established a puppet government in central Lithuania. Poland offered central Lithuania to the Republic of Lithuania on the condition that the two countries unite, but this proposal was rejected by the Lithuanians. In fact, central Lithuania was created in 1920. This truly angered the Lithuanians. For a whole 18 years, Poland and Lithuania had no diplomatic relations, and Lithuania never accepted the loss of Vilnius. An interesting fact is that according to the first constitution of Lithuania, it declared Vilnius as its capital, despite never having controlled it. In 1931, the International Court in The Hague ruled that Poland violated international norms by annexing central Lithuania, but no actions were taken regarding this. In this alternative history, that is supposed to change. Poland will have to transfer central Lithuania to the Lithuanian state, which will normalize relations between the two countries and pave the way for unification. An alternative option is a successful attempt by Poland to annex Lithuania in 1919. In any case, in this scenario, Poland would have to annex Lithuania. Thus, Germany would not have to lose Danzig, which would complicate the rise of ultra-nationalists and make their coming to power much more difficult. Most likely, there would still be a transition to Polish Lithuania. Historically, Lithuania did not want to take Melitopol and was briefly recognized as an independent state under the mandate of the League of Nations. Lithuania historically offered to give up Melitopol in favor of Germany in exchange for the transfer of Vilnius to Lithuania, but this never happened. This time, Poland would control Lithuania. Despite the Lithuanians' unwillingness, the Poles would force them to accept it. This is an important moment, as Poland now gains access to the sea, and as I mentioned earlier, the United States will be more actively involved in this peace treaty. According to the 14 points of Woodrow Wilson, the 13th point stated that Poland would receive guaranteed access to the sea, but it did not specify where exactly. Thus, we did not significantly change the treaty, so Germany will be able to keep the Danzig corridor. The next question is Saar. I believe it is better to keep Saar, but to hold a referendum much earlier, in the mid-20s. Historically, France took Saar and promised to hold a referendum 15 years after the occupation. In this alternative history, under pressure from the USA, it could have happened in 5 years. This would allow France to maintain some influence over Germany for a while, but ultimately Germany would know it would regain Saar much sooner than in our reality. In fact, they would have received it even before the Great Depression, which would have helped improve their economic situation. The situation with the island is more complex. France will likely not agree to remove military expenses from its treaty, but perhaps we can negotiate a final date. It will be far in the future, probably in the 40s, but it will give Germany enough reasons not to resort to extremes. Finally, the issue of reparations. Germany was forced to pay so much money that it took 91 years to settle its debts. As a result, we need to reduce these payments by at least several billion, but we cannot eliminate them entirely so that Germany does not become too strong. The initial debt amounted to 132 billion gold marks, a colossal sum that Germany could not realistically repay. An agreement to revise the terms helped Germany reorganize its military operations, allowing payment in raw materials. However, this happened only 6 years after the end of the Great War, and damage had already been done. The crisis in the Ruhr occurred in 1923 when France and Belgium occupied the Ruhr because Germany failed to meet delivery quotas. The French side demanded that Germany pay and leave the territory only after receiving what it wanted. Germany refused to concede and ordered the population of the occupied zone not to go to work, while the government began printing money and paying it to workers. This further exacerbated hyperinflation in the country, delivering another blow to the German economy. This issue may be the most important in this alternate history. With greater pressure from the USA, Germany immediately has the opportunity to settle its military debts with raw materials, rather than after 6 years. If all goes well, there will be no crisis in the Ruhr, or it will become more contentious for the French. In any case, Germany's economy will be slightly better, and the nation will be less humiliated. By the way, nothing should be given to Denmark. They do not deserve it, and the only reason Danton acted this way was to harm Germany. Northern Schleswig is a small territory, but it is a step that can help Germany. The fact is that Denmark acquired more German land in Europe than Belgium without waging war, while Belgium suffered huge losses, around 100,000 people. In an alternate history, North Schleswig will still be German. Now, perhaps this alternative peace treaty seems too lenient for Germany, and there is some truth to that, but I believe it is necessary. If we destroy the economy but keep most of Germany's territory, a politician will still easily come to power. The same will happen in the reverse situation. Although a rise to power is possible in this scenario, I still wanted it to be excellent and interesting compared to our real timeline. It is important to emphasize that this video is not about Germany being less punished after World War I. Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire will also receive the same treatment. A little something different. I have a simple request. Subscribe to the channel if you ever liked my videos, including this one. Thank you in advance. Now, having finished with that, let's get to the essence of the script. Over the years, the United States will continue to provide Germany with loans to pay off debts to France and Great Britain. Germany's economy will begin to recover significantly faster than in our real history, although by the early 20s, it will still not be truly impressive. Talking about the early 20s, I see no reason why Italy couldn't become nationalist at this time. Italy will still receive much less than promised in this alternative history, and its economy will remain in poor condition. All the steps that Muslims took to seize power will happen just the same, without delays. If you need the Austrian artist out of the game, you can make Hindenburg a bit craftier, or send the Austrian artist to prison for a longer term after the events in Vienna. These are two possible ways to achieve that. When the year 1925 arrives, it is time for Sana to hold a referendum. It will be accepted by a large majority to join Germany, as it happened in our history, which Dant will be forced to acknowledge. France will try to prolong the process as much as possible, but to avoid damaging relations with Britain, it will have to agree. Saarland will become part of Germany in 1925, and the resources in this region will help Germany pay off its debts to France more quickly, which the French will agree to. Germany's economy will continue to recover until 1929. Every educated historian knows what happened that year. But for those who are not aware, let me tell you, the Great Depression. Americans will begin to cut their loans to Germany, which the country used to pay off debts to Britain and France. Meanwhile, the French and British will begin demanding reparations faster, leading to economic difficulties in Germany. However, this can be mitigated by the changes we have made. As the Great Depression continues into the early 30s, Germany will eventually begin to draw closer to Dante, seeing it as the only way to fully recover from the crisis. I believe this will be beneficial in the long term, but in the short term, people will start to be dissatisfied with their government for cooperating with the former Entente powers. In this alternative reality, some extremist parties, such as nationalists, may come to power and gain influence, but in my opinion, they will not be able to form any government. Without an internationalist Germany, Italy stands alone in its ideology and aligns itself with Hungary and Austria, members of the Rome Protocol, with which it will have very good relations. Italy will invade Ethiopia in 1935, just as in history, but they will not have Germany to rely on for subsidizing the economy. The Italian economy in this alternative reality will be weaker. The Spanish Civil War will start anyway, and that won't change. Germany is unlikely to support either side. Therefore, Franco will find it harder to achieve complete victory. But the odds will still be in his favor. Perhaps it will take a little more time, and Spain will be further destroyed, but the country will become internationalist, just like in our history. At this moment, it is difficult to determine the exact political events in Germany as we begin to enter the part of the scenario where the butterfly effect starts to take hold. I do not know which party will maintain power or gain the presidency. It can be assumed that it is the Social Democratic Party of Germany, but we will never know whether she will barely hold power or secure a comfortable majority over the opposition. By the end of the 30s, Germany and its former adversaries will recover. Their economies will begin to slowly rise. However, they will not be the only ones recovering. The Soviet Union will also begin its attempts at expansion, starting with the Baltics. I wouldn't be surprised if they temporarily leave Lithuania alone, as they wouldn't want to border the British and French ally in Germany, and also because Lithuania remains a puppet of Poland. If Stalin begins his winter war, it's hard to say, but I think he will try to do so. If this happens, events will unfold as in history. However, Germany will also support the Finns, which will allow them to hold out longer. Even France and Britain initially wanted to help Finland, so they will quickly send volunteers. As a result, Soviet troops may suffer heavy losses, especially in London, just like in our history. Now, is this realistic? Probably not. Stalin was more pragmatic, and starting a war not only against Germany but also against France and Britain, not to mention Poland, would be quite foolish. The Baltic states and Finland had no guarantees from the West, while Romania was in a complicated situation. Realistically, Stalin can only expand into the Baltic and Finland, which the Allies are well aware of. Perhaps in this alternative world there will be no war, but I would argue that it would make the scenario less interesting. In this alternate history, after acquiring part of Finland, Stalin is likely to turn his gaze towards Bessarabia, to which Romania will probably respond with a refusal, as France has not fallen and is still strong enough to protect Romania. The Soviet Union will invade Romania, but France will try to intervene diplomatically, seeking to reach an agreement. I believe that due to the skill of French diplomacy, known as giving the enemy everything they want, the Soviet troops will be forced to retreat, but they will be allowed to annex Bessarabia instead of northern Bukovina in exchange for a non-aggression pact with Romania and a possible guarantee of Polish independence. However, an ultra-nationalist regime will not arise in Romania. It is hard to say what will happen next, but I wouldn't be surprised if they remain allies of France, as France promised to return their territories after the start of the war between the Soviets and the Allies. Of course, it is possible that the internationalists will prevail in Romania and unite with Italy, or even become communists and allies of the Soviet Union. I would prefer that the Romanians remain with the French for simplicity. At this time, the French can allow Germany to begin rearmament, albeit on a limited scale. 250,000 soldiers, as well as tanks and airplanes. But this will be enough to raise national pride in Germany, as one of the last serious reasons for the Treaty of Versailles will be partially removed, which will increase the popularity of the current government, while Germany will not be nationalistic in this alternative history. The Japanese are about to take the initiative, and their invasion of China in 1937 will proceed much like in reality, the Marco Polo Bridge incident, the United Front of China, and so on. However, their war in China will be significantly different, since there will be no international influence in Germany. Symbiotic relationships will continue to develop. It is worth recalling that at the beginning, the Bavarian Republic and internationalist Germany supported the Chinese against the Japanese. Germany even sent a lot of weapons and advisors to China. Before the Austrian painter's power grab, Germany will start sending volunteers and aid to protect its investments in China. Moreover, German advisors will be sent to China for a much longer duration before the war begins. Thus, China can present itself slightly better than it is in reality. Additionally, France may also support the Chinese, as it does not have to worry about Germany. This puts Japan in a difficult position, as China becomes significantly stronger and resists. Beijing and Nanking will fall due to their geographical proximity and Japan's early strength, while the Chinese are just beginning their civil conflict and have made some progress in the north. However, Japan will start to lose ground much faster. This will not be a lightning exit like in 1940, but by the end of the decade, the situation for Japan will become very bad, and Japan will likely reach its peak somewhere in the spring of 1939. I will probably return here in a few years to illuminate events after 1940. By then, Germany will be seen as a peaceful nation and a role model to aspire to. With the deepening ties to former adversaries and the rise of communism, I wouldn't be surprised if France finally overcomes its pride and forms a defensive pact with Germany and the United Kingdom. Poland and Romania will become factors protected by this new alliance, which will be used to combat the currently expansionist and aggressive communist force. By that time, the Soviet Union will be trying to make new acquaintances in the Balkans.